Okay, so that was our server role. Now let's navigate one level up and list all the roles again. Let's look at this PHP role now. cd into this folder, and in the PHP folder, let's view our tasks main YAML file. And this is our tasks file for the PHP role. And you can see, here also we are not doing much, but just installing a single package called php-gd, which is a PHP extension to process images. So we are using the apt module to install this package called php-gd. Okay, let's quit our editor and check out the MySQL role. Navigate one level up. Now let's go inside MySQL. cd mysql/. Let's list the contents of the MySQL role folder. Next, let's view the task YAML file. Execute view tasks/main.yaml. So this is the Ansible role responsible for installing and configuring MySQL on the target host. On the screen, we can see the role YAML file for MySQL. The first thing we are doing here is installing some dependencies for MySQL and Python. Once the dependencies are taken care of, then we are using a new module called MySQL_DB, which is an Ansible module to manage MySQL databases. This module needs two input arguments. One is the database name and another is state. For the database name, we are just giving it a variable. And you will notice this variable does not sound like a variable which will be assigned to or filled in by the setup module by way of Ansible facts. Surely it must be a user-defined variable. So then the question arises, where do we define the values for these user-defined variables? The answer to this is, it should be either in the default or the vars folder. We will look at that shortly. Then next we are creating a new MySQL user using a module called MySQL_user. It takes in 3 arguments. The first one is the name of the database user, and the second argument is the password we want to be assigned to our database user. Both the username and password are also specified as user-defined variables. Finally, we have the privileges we want to assign to our MySQL user. Now let's look at where the values for these variables are defined. Let's try to review the contents of /vars/main.yaml. We will use the cat command for this. Okay, so the vars YAML is empty. Let's try /default/main.yaml. Here we go. You can see the user-defined variables are defined in this default/main.yaml. This file also has the default values which have been assigned to these variables. These variables are going to be available throughout this Ansible role, which means any piece of code or YAML file within this role can reference any of these variables. So this is how we can make use of variables in Ansible roles and across files. Defining these common variables in one place enables us to use them in multiple places within the Ansible role. And if down the road we want to make a change to our role, we can change the value of a few variables in one place. Thus our code becomes more modular. So that was our MySQL role. Let's move on to the final Ansible role, the Wordpress role. Execute cd ... and go up one level. And then navigate to the Wordpress role folder. Okay, now we are inside the Wordpress folder. Let's list the contents of this folder. Execute ls. Let's view the contents of tasks subfolder. Execute view tasks/main.yaml. Okay, so this is the playbook inside the role for installing WordPress. Let's walk through this playbook step by step. The first step is downloading WordPress. So this task uses a module called get_URL, which is similar to wget or curl. It downloads a remote file from the wordpress.org website and stores the downloaded file in the /tmp folder. We are also specifying an additional argument. This is to avoid any issues with SSL certificates. Once the file has been downloaded, next we run a task to extract the WordPress installer archive. For this, we will use an archive module. The arguments include the src/temp/WordPress, and the destination is the /var/www directory, where the unarchived data will get saved. And here we are supplying another argument, copy equals no. We are also specifying sudo privileges while unarchiving this installation package. That is because we may need elevated privileges to copy over the files into /var/www directory. Let's quickly refer to the unarchive module's documentation to understand what the copy argument is for. We will quit our playbook momentarily and execute Ansible-doc unarchive to review the documentation. Here is the documentation for the unarchive module, and here is the copy argument. So it states if it is true, the original archive file is copied from masternode to the target machine. Otherwise, the module will look for source archive file on the target machine itself. Since we have already used the get_URL module to download the WordPress installer file on the target machine, we do not really need to copy it from the master node. Now let's get back to our WordPress role playbook. Execute view tasks/main.yaml. Okay, moving along with our tasks. Now we have downloaded the WordPress archive and we have extracted it in the target folder. Next, we need to update the Apache configuration file to point the default Apache's root folder to our new WordPress root folder. For this purpose, we have this task called Update Default Apache Site. It is using a module called line_in_file. Line_in_file module will search a particular link in a particular file and optionally change a single line in the file. So here it is looking for the destination file, which is a virtual host file. Virtual host files are the files that specify the actual configuration of our virtual hosts and dictate how the Apache web server will respond to various domain requests. Apache comes with a default virtual host file called 000-default.conf. So with this step, we are trying to update the virtual host file. /etc/apache2/sites enabled /000-default.conf. And in this file, via this step, we are looking for a line which configures the document root for our Apache web server, and then we are replacing it with a new value. We are going to look for document root /var/www/html, and we are going to change it to /var/www/wordpress. Then we are raising a notification called Restart Apache. This is because we just modified the Apache configuration file. To ensure that our changes take effect, we should attempt to restart Apache. Next, we need to make some changes to the WordPress config file. So first, we will execute this task called copy sample config file. Here we will use the command module to run a move command. It will essentially rename a sample config file and convert that sample config file to the actual config file used by WordPress. Once the config file is available, next we will execute this task called update WordPress config file to update some configuration entries in the file. Here, once again, we will use the line in file module to look for certain configuration settings and replace them with real values. This is an interesting part here. So here we want to update 3 settings which are specified in 3 separate lines in the config file. These 3 settings are DB name, which is our MySQL database name, the MySQL username, and MySQL user's password. This information is used by WordPress to connect to MySQL and read and store its data. You will recall these are the 3 variables we have already configured in the role. So to put all of this together, we are wrapping these variables along with the regular expression patterns for their respective configuration settings, and we are storing them in a list. Then for our line in file module, we are going to loop over this list, and for each element, the line in file module will look for the regular expression pattern. It will find the setting corresponding to that pattern in the config file and update its value with the Ansible variable real value.